Hello, I'm Karen Wespieser. I've recently joined the team at and I'm delighted to be able to share some Teacher Tapp data with you today. For those of you that don't know, Teacher Tapp is a surveying app. It was created by two of my education heroes, Laura McInerney and Professor Becky Allen. Throw in the developer expertise of former teacher Alex Wetherall, and you've got a fantastic teacher resource used by over 9,000 teachers each day. There's a massive amount of data that the Teacher Tapp team have collected over the past 3 years. But for reasons that will become apparent in due course, I'm going to talk to you today about the data that Teacher Tapp have collected around the relationship between parents and teachers. But before we get into the Teacher Tapp data, I'd like to take a look at what we know about the subject more broadly. So this data is from the Education Endowment Foundation, and their meta-analysis shows that there's moderate evidence of impact from parental engagement, around 2 to 3 months to be precise. They show that it has a moderate cost and that the evidence base is also moderate. So what does this mean? Well, it means that parental engagement is a pretty broad church. The evidence around parental engagement is often focused at primary schools rather than secondary, or certainly better than specialist or alternative settings. And the interventions that researchers look at also vary enormously, both in terms of the type of intervention, the scale that it's working at, and the cost. So, for example, you could set up a parent workshop in your school using your teachers, or you could set up a texting service to do homeschool communications. On another level, you could look at a family support program, perhaps with some sort of specially trained person involved with that. And then at kind of the most detailed and expensive end of the scale, you could employ a dedicated homeschool liaison teacher whose job it is to focus on this, which would cost as much as a teacher's salary. Quite a difference in terms of scale and cost, thinking back to a parent workshop. So overall, whilst it's undoubtedly a good thing to do, the problem seems to be defining exactly what it is. We don't actually know how to improve attainment by increasing parental engagement. But before we go into too much detail, let's look at what parental engagement actually looks like using the Teacher Tapp data. And one thing we know well at Teacher Tapp is that how you ask the question is very important. For example, we have asked, how much do you agree with the following statements? Families and the wider community are supportive of teachers and students in this school. And the majority of teachers agree with that. So 53% agree, 9% strongly agree. There are very few who disagree with a statement like that. So from that, we can say that broadly, teachers think that families are supportive of what's going on in their school. However, if we ask a negatively worded question, then we get a much more negative response. So, for example, we asked, the parents of my pupils have unrealistic expectations about how I can support their children. To what extent do you agree or disagree? And the results for this show a more negative view of parental relations in the school. Taking this a step further, if we ask questions about society more broadly rather than just about your school, responses become even more negative. So we've asked, in my experience, parents have become far too disrespectful of teachers. So quite a negative question, but framed in a broader society way rather than just about an individual's school. And you see that a really high percentage, that's about 84% of teachers agree with that statement, even if it's just slightly agree. And so that's quite surprising given the initial support that teachers reported feeling from parents. Taking it one step further, we find that 90% of teachers agree that some parents do not teach their own children to act respectfully. So all of this adds up to show that even though teachers feel parents are supportive in general, they also think that parents have unrealistic expectations and that parents can be disrespectful. Basically, I would say that the relationship status between parents and teachers is complicated. Another way that we can look at this using the Teacher Tapp data is by looking at specific incidences rather than looking at society or even your school generally. We can look at specific incidents and ask about that instead. So, whilst we know that teachers say that parents are broadly supportive of their school, we've also asked whether a parent has done anything to undermine behaviour sanctions that have been put in place within a time-bound period. And here we find over a quarter say that they have. So it's a bit of a dichotomy saying that parents are supportive, but here's a specific action in which they're basically not being supportive. Like I said, it's complicated. One further example is when we asked whether teachers have ever been shouted at by a parent. And it's really quite saddening and shocking how many teachers have, particularly head teachers, have been shouted at. It's complicated. But let's take a quick look at what teachers do from their side of the relationship. Well, firstly, it differs quite a lot depending on your job within a school. So if you're a head teacher, particularly in a primary school, then you report that you make it easy for parents to be able to contact you. However, if you're a classroom teacher in a secondary school, then perhaps not quite so much. We've also asked about what teachers think parents would change within their schools. And this gives us a really interesting idea of what some of those points of disharmony might be. So teachers have picked out that they think that parents would change homework policies, but also behaviour policies, uniform, extracurricular wraparound activities, and perhaps most importantly, say that they don't think that parents are happy with the reporting practices. So to me, that says that teachers know that the way that they are reporting and communicating with parents isn't quite right. And it's one of the most difficult parts of the relationship to work on. So what could we do to research this relationship further? Well, one thing I think would be really helpful would be to be able to triangulate the data. All the data that we've looked at, the EEF data and the Teacher Tapp data, it's all from the point of view of schools and teachers. But what we really need to do to get a fuller picture and to start to look at some solutions is to get more parent data, to be able to triangulate the information sources. And so I am delighted to be able to reveal to you at Research Ed Norwich that next month the team behind Teacher Tapp will be launching Parent Ping. The concept is just the same as Teacher Tapp. A small number of questions will be asked every day, but instead of to a teacher audience, we'll be asking a parent audience. After the parents have answered their question, it will work just the same as the Teacher Tapp, where they'll get the opportunity to read a tip or a blog or an article. and they'll get the opportunity to see the aggregated responses from the question on the day before. I think this will add massively to better understanding and to improving homeschool relationships. But like I say, that's still at least a couple of weeks away. So in the meantime, what I've done is put together 10 tips on homeschool communication that I hope might help. Some of these tips might be rather obvious, but what I hope is that from the 10 you find one or half of one or just a little nugget that you didn't think of before, that you think you could utilise in your homeschool communications and that might make a difference to that homeschool relationship in a positive way. And then at the end, I'll share the parent ping details and the Teacher Tapp app details for those of you that aren't already tapping. So let's get started with the tips. Tip number 1, be honest. Honesty is the foundation of any relationship. If parents suspect that they're not being told the truth, or that teachers are glossing over concerns, not being fully disclosing of any issues, then the relationship is doomed to fail. And that's two-way, isn't it? You want parents to be as honest with you as possible about what's going on in the home life. And I think it's nice to be able to reciprocate that with being as honest as you can about what's going on at school. Linked closely to that is about being timely. So don't wait until parents' evening or to the report cards come out to be able to express concerns. Nip problems in the bud as they're arising. There's nothing worse than as a parent, if you think everything's going swimmingly and you turn up to parents' evening expecting to hear a glowing report, to be told, well, your child's not been doing very well in maths this term. Well, from what point have they not been doing very well? Is there something that we could have been doing about it to have helped the situation earlier? Don't leave it until those big check-in points. Take the opportunity to communicate at an earlier point. Related to that, ask for help. Actively seek parents' expertise about what works at home, what they're doing at home, and whether there's anything that you could be replicating or reinforcing in school. This is particularly the case for parents who have children with a special educational need or disability. These parents might have some really good insights into how to manage behaviour or learning difficulties because they're doing it most of the time in the home environment. And by working together and using similar strategies, you might be able to make a massive difference in that child's learning. Number 4, make it easy to communicate. Remember that 25% of secondary classroom teachers who admitted they don't make it easy to communicate. Let's try and change that. So thinking at the school level, how easy is it to navigate your school's website? Do you think a parent could easily find your contact details? Could they find your email address or your telephone extension? Would they know what the best time of day is to contact you if they wanted to have a conversation? Is your receptionist a bit of a dragon? It's probably a good thing, fielding off calls from salespeople or whoever they might be taking calls from. But when it's from a parent, do they know what the circumstances are in which they should be put through to you and how quickly and how to get a message to you when it's an emergency? Also think about avoiding jargon. There's so much jargon in education, so many acronyms and abbreviations, but parents won't know them. Don't assume that they know any of them, and try to keep your language as clear of them as possible and to talk in normal language, sensible terms that anyone would understand. One final tip, if you're dealing with a child with a special educational needs such as dyslexia, be aware that some of these conditions are hereditary. So, for example, if you've got a child in your class who's got a literacy difficulty, it could well be the case that their parent has got a literacy difficulty as well. So if you're writing notes to them, if you're sending letters home to them, be aware that they might not be able to read them as fluently or as easily as you can. And perhaps think about different ways that you could communicate with them other than in writing. And if you are having to communicate in writing, making sure that your sentence structure and the words that you choose to use are as accessible as possible. Number 5, listen. This is probably one of my most obvious tips, but bear with me. I think what you need to remember around listening is that so much of homeschool communication is one way. The school is sending out letters, reports, bulletins, and they're rarely expecting a reply. It's often the school doing the talking and the parent who's being asked to listen. So could you put in check-in points where you get to listen back to what parents need to say? And when they do say something, are you making sure that you're actively listening to what they're saying? Related to that, you might want to think about who's got the power in the relationship. Remember, many parents could have had quite a poor school experience themselves. They might have been scared of their teacher or their head teacher. And it's likely that that will have carried through into adulthood. And they might not feel confident talking to you. They might feel scared of you. They probably do feel scared of your head teacher. Think about how you can put them at their ease. One of the ways you can do this is thinking about how you ask them to address you. Do you want them to be calling you Mr. Smith when you're meeting face to face? And if you're asking them to call you Mr. Smith, are you calling them Mrs. Wespieser in reply? Or, my personal bugbear, are you calling them William's mum? Think about how that affects the power dynamic if you are there setting yourself up with a title and then you're referring to them not by their title, not even by their name, but their relationship to another person. Some people might like that. I find it immensely annoying. And so what I think is best in these situations is simply to ask. At the start of the meeting, say, I'm Mr. Smith, can I call you Mrs. Wespieser? Or, I'm Bob, can I call you Karen? And that sets up the tone of the meeting. If in doubt, then do go for the more formal term and make sure that it's on an equal basis. Number 7 is about structured conversations. So if you are having to have a difficult conversation, reporting back on work that's not going well, behaviour that's not meeting expectations, then think about how you might prepare for that conversation. If you've got things that you think are going to be difficult to say or difficult to hear, then consider putting it into a template beforehand and structuring your conversation so it doesn't just focus on the negative, that you do a good news sandwich, if you like, that you include ideas for what can be done about it and don't just present problems. Write all of that down beforehand, not a script. A script will not help the situation, but writing down a kind of format that you want to go through the meeting in so that you get all of those key points across. Just thinking about it at that level of detail beforehand will make the conversation much easier to have. Number 8 is thinking about homework. Remember, this was the policy that most teachers thought that parents would already want to change. So is your homework policy a good one? Are you being clear about what a balanced level of support looks like from parents? Or are you making assumptions? Do you know what you mean by a balanced level of support? Might it mean something different to you than it means to parents? Make it really clear as well about how long homework should take. as a parent, I know that homework can be one of the brief glimpses you have into school life, but it can also be a massive point of tension between a parent and a child. And big, difficult homeworks have their place. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be setting homework, but I'm saying that you should make it clear about how long you'd expect a child to be spending on it. If you have a child that you can see is visibly struggling with homework, whether it's that they're not completing it or that they're not completing it to your satisfaction, then perhaps instead of asking them to complete it, ask their parents to write down how long they're spending on it. Maybe it's okay not to complete a homework if they've sat there and worked hard at it for an hour. But if you're getting something back after an hour and it's rubbish, then you've got a different situation that you need to deal with. And understanding that and having that free-flowing communication again will be really, really helpful, I think. Related to that, share details with parents about what approaches and resources they could be using to support home learning. So, for example, if you're expecting your pupils to be using the bar model in maths or systematic synthetic phonics when you're teaching reading, then you might need to explain that to parents because they probably don't know anything about it. Bring them in for a workshop under normal circumstances, set up a Zoom call with them under current circumstances, and show them what you're showing the children, because some things have changed since parents were at school, and they might not feel that they can support their children well enough without knowing that bits of information. It could be similar as well for behavioural or pastoral approaches. If you've got something that works well, just like I said at the start, for parents to share with you, but for you to share back with parents as well. If you've got tips about what works in getting a certain child to concentrate or to sit still or just to spend some time with their work, then share that back with parents because they don't have the expertise for pedagogy and behaviour control that you necessarily do. They haven't been trained in that. So share what you know in order to support that home learning. And number 10, value the parents. Remember, this relationship is two-way. It's in everybody's interest to get it right, most importantly in the child's interest. If you can see the value in what parents can contribute, then I'm sure you'll be a lot closer in understanding the value in what you can contribute back to them. So those were my 10 tips. I hope that they weren't blindingly obvious. I hope they weren't too patronising or anything like that. And I hope that you found a snippet there that you can take back into your practice. Next time when I present on this, hopefully I'll have some parent ping data to bring in to really share how parents are feeling. Because at the moment, I think we're a bit blind to that bigger picture of what's going on at home. So thank you for listening. If you don't already have Teacher Tapp, you can download it from the App Store. You can scan that QR code, you can Google it, you can find us on Twitter. If you're interested in Parent Ping, then we have a website up and running that you can go and visit, and you can register your details there so that when the app is live in July, then we'll send you a message and you'll be able to download it straight away. If you have more thoughts and questions, then you can email me at Teacher Tapp, or you can find me on Twitter. Thank you very much.